Right, President Marion. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Martin Bosley, not just as a great Wellingtonian, but also as a long-time friend. Now, most of you will know Martin from his cooking exploits around Wellington. You probably don't know a great deal about his background. Martin has a love of food that dates back to his very earliest days. In fact, his mother's here today, and I was talking to her just before dinner, and she said there was a time when Martin actually learnt to talk before he could walk. And I remember him looking up at me out of his bassinet as I was proffering him a bottle of warm cow's milk, and he said to me, "You know, Mum, if you just put some nutmeg in that and shook it up..." Anyway, Martin's been cooking since the time when the best food in town was to be found at the James Cook buffet. Fortunately, Martin's moved on. Pay attention. His first head chef job was at a restaurant called the Grain of Salt, which you'll all remember. He then was head chef at Petit Lion for some time, and ended up buying that restaurant and converting it to a restaurant called Givernet. But his, I think, most memorable time of cooking for me anyway was the years he spent at Brasserie Flip, which I still believe is one of the best restaurants Wellington ever had, and I've implored him for years to re-establish it. However, rather than doing that, he established Martin Bosley's around in Oriental Bay, and I'm sure most of you have dined there over the years and found it to be a wonderful place. In fact, it won the Cuisine Best Restaurant in New Zealand award in 2010. Martin's written several award-winning books. He's been a food columnist, he's a TV appearer, celebrity. But like many celebrities, much of the work that Martin does, the good work that Martin does, goes unheralded and unsung. And today he's here to talk to you about one such project, a project he established under the auspices of Wellington on a Plate, to do with the rehabilitation of prisoners. It's called Prison Gate to Plate. So Martin's here to talk to you today about that project. Thank you for coming along, Martin.
Fantastic introduction. I hope I can live up to that. President Marion, thank you very much. Chris, thank you for inviting me. Mum, thank you for coming. Thanks, Jean, for another surprise today. So yeah, I said to Chris, just say a few words and I'll fill in all the gaps, but there actually are no gaps to fill in. Thanks, Chris. That was pretty much my introduction right there. But as Chris said, I thought I'd talk today about the Prison Gate to Plate project that I'm involved with through the Department of Corrections. I had, well, from the nutmeg and the milk from an early age, I had a rather wonderful upbringing that was surrounded by wonderful, great food, and as Chris said, through the restaurants that I'd sort of worked in over the years, all sort of at that fine dining end of the scale. I was surrounded by good food, good quality ingredients, great quality glassware. My last restaurant, it was all, you know, the best of the best, and enjoyed a glass of beautiful wine at the end of an evening service. So my life was going particularly well until one day the Department of Corrections walked in through my front door, which is never something that you really want to have happen as those guys in their suits come through. And they said to me, "We have an idea we'd like to talk to you about doing a dinner in a prison." So I wasn't too sure where they were really going with it. At that time, I was on the board of Wellington on a Plate. We just established Wellington on a Plate. It was the second year of Wellington on a Plate, and that's just had its, it must be the third year, so it's just had its 10th year now, this year. And so I sat down with these people, and they said, "Look, one of the ideas that had been put forward by a corrections officer was to showcase the better stories that happen in New Zealand prisons, because we're all very familiar with the very negative stories that hit our front page all the time. And they said, but actually there's a lot of good work that happens in a prison. And one of those ideas was to highlight that the work of the men at the central kitchen at Ruataka prison put into training the men inside there with their unit standards up to level 3. And initially, I just was not interested at all. And I said, so we want to do a dinner. We want you to train the chefs. We want to sell tickets to that dinner. The general public will come, will eat in the prison. and ideally we're going to get it, you know, you'll help us get it on the calendar for Wellington on a plate. And I think my answer to all of those things was like, you're joking, you must be mad, that's crazy, and the answer is no. And that year we also brought Visa on as our naming rights sponsor for Wellington on a plate, and I thought, this is hardly Visa's demographic. I don't see them wanting to be associated with a bunch of cutthroats in a prison. Anyway, so they said, yeah, we thought you might say that, so they'd come prepared, and they said, you know, do you know much about prisons? And I said, no, but I've got an inquiring mind. And we're all sort of, I think we're all kind of, you know, animal at the zoo, sort of go, well, what is a prison like? So they just gave me some of the facts about New Zealand prisons, and I've always been interested in the idea of food as an agent of change. And some of the statistics they gave me kind of, you know, they surprised me. None of us live more than 100 kilometres from a jail in this country. We've got 17 jails, about to build more, 18. You know, the jail we're talking about building now will be the largest jail in the southern hemisphere, which is kind of crazy when you think about it for a country of this size. At that stage, 6 years ago or 7 years ago, there was 10,500 men and women incarcerated in New Zealand jails. That number, as you know, some of you will know, this year has ballooned out to just under 12,000 at its highest. It's now reduced by about another 800, but it's still sitting around the 11,000 mark. So we're going in the wrong direction here in terms of the numbers that we are putting away in prison. And the statistics went on, and I was fascinated by that. And they said, "Would you like to go to prison?" Well, there's an offer you can't refuse. And so just for the day, right? There's a few parking fines out there that might be outstanding, but I just want to be clear, this is a short-term thing. And they said, yes. So the arrangements were made for me to visit Rimataka for the day, and I spent this day in the prison kitchen there, and so basically followed the process of food from being made. There's 1,000 men incarcerated, and now women incarcerated out at Rimataka, who get fed 3 times a day. On back then, what was $4.75 a day was the budget for feeding that. It's now $5.10, so it's not gone. There hasn't been much movement forward in that. And that was you know, breakfast, lunch, and the dinner. And what I saw just horrified me. Really, it was. I was believe a man in prison would get 11 slices of bread per day as part of their diet. It's low fat, it's low sodium, and that's probably about the 2 kindest things I can say about the food that they get in there. More so that it was a nationalised menu, that every prisoner in this country every day eats the same food, and even if you're transferred from one prison to the next, if it's the 3rd Thursday of the month, you know what you're going to be getting for dinner that night. The prisoners were no longer able to buy from their local communities and support the local communities of producers or suppliers, growers, as they had been used to several years prior to that. But more shocking to me was when I followed the meal train, which was the prisoners are fed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's nationwide. Was when I got down to the units where where the cells are, was that they were locked up in their cells individually. And I'd always imagined from everything that I'd seen on television was that they would eat communally, socially around a table, and I'd seen Orange is the New Black. But I do say if you're going to go to a prison, don't watch America's Toughest Jails before you go into prison, because that's not a good idea in terms of your expectations. And they were fed in their cells on their own, and those doors remained closed until 6:30 or 8 o'clock the following morning. And I was like, this is just wrong. This is kind of crazy. This didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Food for me has always been a social occasion. Even if I thought even if it's in prison, you're still sitting around and you're still talking over food. Food does that. It connects people. It brings out the best and also, obviously, in some cases, the worst in people. But it gets the dialogue going. And my mum was like, we sat around the table and we ate dinner as a family all the time. It's just what and in the restaurants, people sit around the table. This is what you do. So by the time I'd reached back to the prison kitchen, I kind of changed my mind about saying no and said, yeah, I think I want to be involved with something here. And working with work with these men. So 6 men were chosen from the prison kitchen. There's 32 prisoners that work in the kitchen out there, and 6 men were chosen to a certain criteria, which was where they were in their sentence plan, where they're likely to get moved to another jail to complete a training course as part of their part of their parole process, their behaviour, and a few other sort of criteria that went on as well. And they didn't really know anything about what we were doing. The idea was, they said that we were going to try and do a dinner that we would sell tickets to. The general public were going to come along and eat inside a prison. which I thought we're never going to get there. The first day I meet these 6 guys, it was me on one side of a table in the prison cafeteria staff room, and these 6 other very large units on the other side of the table just looking right back at me. And we said, so what, do you guys know much about food? Where do we start here? Because I was interested as to what food had been to them before they were in jail, what it was to them now they were in jail, and what it might be to them upon leaving jail, what possibilities were around that. And I was literally met with blank looks. And those first days that we got in there, we started working with them around the idea of what a menu was. I thought this is going to be a very long road to hoe, and I could lose everything that I've worked for here in terms of my reputation. This could be a giant failure. And I remember sort of three months into, and I was going out once a week, every Tuesday for 4 or 5 hours, saying to one of the men who was when he was on the team, I look out there one morning, he was in this giant stock pot, this huge boiler, and he was mixing coleslaw, the first batch of coleslaw for 500 men. He had more cabbage and carrots stacked up next to him for the second batch of 500. And he was sleeves rolled right up on his overalls, and he was just in there mixing the stuff by hand. And I said, oh, kia ora, Pete, how long have you been in there? And he said, 13 years. And I was like, I mean, actually, how long have you been mixing the coleslaw? But I went, wow, you've been in jail for 13 years? So I thought, wow, so how much longer you got to go? And he went, oh, probably another 5 or 6. I thought, oh, Pete's not in here for armed robbery or for theft, car theft or something. So I spoke to the prison officers and I said, that guy Pete on the team, I said, he's in jail for a long time. And they said, Martin, who do you think was in here? I was like, oh, I've never even thought about it before. And they said, no, they said, the men on your team, he said, they're all long-term inmates, and that's how you end up in the prison kitchen, is if you're on a long sentence, it takes you a long time to get your risk down. And they said, best not to ask them what they've done though, just get on with the job you've got to do. That's the word of our advice. Anyway, what happened over the subsequent 6 months was their stories came out as we prepared food around a table of learning how to fillet fish and different methods of cookery and different ingredients and whatever. Their stories came out and they unfolded in ways that none of us thought possible or dreamed possible when we started the program. They changed themselves in terms of their self-esteem and their self-confidence. Their relationship with the corrections officers slowly changed over that time as well, where it became, it went from being adversarial to being far more collegial between those two, I guess, warring sides. We had the support of corrections, we had the support of most officers, some that we didn't, but gradually sort of warmed over to us, what it was we were trying to achieve. They could see that we were possibly onto something quite remarkable. As they came out was the public interest in what we're doing grew to the point when the men on the team thought that first year no one was going to buy a ticket, no one wanted to come and see, as they refer to themselves as the animals at the zoo. Why would you want to do this? I remember that first day that the tickets went on sale for Wellington on a plate on a Monday morning, and I got the news about the tickets, and I went to jail on the Tuesday, and the men all came around and they were like, okay, tell us the bad news. And I said, well, the tickets went on sale yesterday. I said, the good news is, they sold out. I said, they sold out in 14 minutes. And I said which was remarkable, right? And then I saw some very big men, some very staunch men, break down in tears and start crying because I think they just, they couldn't believe that people wanted to sort of come and see what they were doing. Anyway, obviously then it kind of got quite real, and they stopped pissing around a little bit and got, sorry mum, they sort of things got quite serious for them, and we did it. And we pulled it off. We did these 3 dinners. We pulled it off successfully, but it was what sort of happened afterwards that was extraordinary. So what we'd done with these men and how they had changed their attitude in terms of working, in terms of their relationship with other people, in terms of their anger management. I said the list just goes on and on and on, to the point where we said we can't just leave it at one dinner. We've got to do more dinners, and this sort of needs to be studied a whole lot more. So we're now into our 6th year. A big part of the program is about re-employment, about offender re-employment when these guys get released from jail, because at the end of the day, they are all getting out. The system is designed to keep some people inside that will never get out, and we should all be reassured by that. But for a large part, these guys are going to be released back into our communities, and they're going to be pumping gas on the forecourt or painting houses or doing whatever it might be, and whatever job we can get them. But all too often, they don't get employed. And that's where the breakdown in rehabilitation really occurs. And because in prison, there are remarkable things that happen in there, and there are great programs, and corrections do a great job of trying to rehabilitate these men. But once they're released, within the community, we don't give them jobs, we don't hire them. And when it gets to question number 4 on the employment application form, and it says, have you ever been convicted of a criminal offence? And they say yes. We tend to go, right, we'll call you Thursday, we'll let you know how we get on, and we never call them Thursday, and they know the phone call's never going to happen. The reality is we have to go to question number 5, or say, well, what was that for? And talk to them about it, and engage with them on it, and take that chance and hire them. Because I tell you, the man who gets a job and earns some money and can feed his family tends not to reoffend, and the statistics are there that prove that. So this became about, so a big part of this program became about employment. We realised a big part of the program as well was connecting those local communities with its local prison. A lot of people who live in Wellington all their lives thought Rimutaka Prison was buried right out in the middle of the Rimutaka somewhere, when in fact it's just by the racecourse out in Upper Hutt, just around the corner. You know, people didn't know this. The successes we've had, I know time's running short, so I'll try and wrap it up, Madam President. The successes that we've had, we started the program with 6 men. Of that original team of 6, 4 have now been either on paroled or are on the release to work scheme, all working within the hospitality industry within the Wellington region, doing spectacularly well. Their employers love the work that they're doing, and they're loving having a job and having somewhere to go to every day, and it's giving them a reason. And I say these 4 men have done very bad things. Their employers know what they've done, and now their workmates know what they've done as well, and all have been accepted into that work environment with a great deal of success. We have 4 new ones now on the team, which has changed the dynamic of things, but we're still making leaps and bounds going forward in terms of bringing them up to speed with where the other 2 from the original team, you know, where they now are. So we're having conversations now around food from that first year when I was having to sort of say, right, this is what a steak looks like, to now where they're saying, so I've been thinking about fermentation, and I want to do something like kimchi because I've read about it on TV. And then 6 years ago, we could never have had that kind of conversation with these men. This year we had, the last 3 years I've taken guest chefs from Wellington in, different chefs each year. I'm fast running out of chef mates that I can call to say, do you want to come to prison with me? It's not an easy conversation to have, but all the ones that have said yes, they've thoroughly enjoyed the experience as well. But this year, the men, I felt the dish that the men put out outshone the dishes of the to our guest chefs, and they were genuinely surprised at the quality of the food and the work that these men are capable of. Things that I've learnt along the way myself, so this is a program that has changed me profoundly, spiritually, emotionally, and in a number of ways, is that you can't judge someone by the worst decision they've ever made, otherwise we'd all be in jail at some point. That you have to believe in the power of change, that people can change. Food can be an agent of that change. As I said, I was curious about it, and I've absolutely seen that now firsthand. Long sentences don't work. We don't need to build bigger prisons. We need to find new ways of approaching this problem, because the current thinking, the current model just simply is not working. What I recently had, and it was something I did with a great deal of thought, was I went to the parole hearings of 2 of the men who had been on our team, because I believe strongly in that they needed to be released into the community, because now we weren't actually doing them any favours other than just keeping them locked up. And I saw another side of the system that I think needs a lot of work as well, and that is the parole system. I think that's got its flaws as well, so that's the next thing I'm going to get my teeth stuck into. The last 2 years, the ticket sales for this, just to finish off, demand for these ticket sales now is so high, and I got sick of the threats for people like, can you get me tickets to that dinner of yours? And I'm like, no. We do three dinners across 3 nights of 90 people each night. We've had to go to a ballot system now where people enter a ballot online. And to the best of my knowledge, it's the only dinner in the world we have to go to a ballot to get tickets to. And this year, 4,000 people tried to get tickets for what is basically 270 seats. And if you extrapolate that out and go, those 4,000 people might be trying to buy 2 or 3 tickets for themselves, their family and friends. There's potentially 12,000 people who wanted to go to dinner inside a prison where you can't take your cell phone and there's no alcohol. I think that's probably somewhere of the time. But I thought, has anyone got any questions? There's things I've left out, but.
Ah,
the clink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
to have dinner there. It's just the amazing restaurant where they train everybody if people graduate with their City and Guilds qualification. Are we doing anything like that in New Zealand?
No, we can't. I've just recently finished a tour of 8 other prisons around New Zealand to see what those prisons are doing in the food space in terms of training. Rimataka itself is kind of unique that we can do this dinner there, and it's largely it's got a commissary, a large central kitchen with enough men in there that we can take 6 out to do a program with. But the New Zealand prisons are just not set up to do anything like what, I mean, we would love to do something like the Clink. It's difficult. One of the things that I am involved in is I'm on the board of an organisation called Trade School Industries. We've just opened our first cafe out in Nainai, which we're taking released women from Arahata prison into that cafe. We seat about 30 people. So we're giving them barista training currently in Arahata, and they come out. So we've got a manager and a few other staff out there. So we opened that about 3 weeks ago now. So we're doing our bit to do what we can, what we can do to help ourselves in the community. We'd like to open more of those cafes around the place and see people come through. But it's a difficult thing to do. So what we're trying to do is get, like Hawke's Bay, for instance, they've got a fantastic beekeeping program there, and they're making an organic honey. And right now that honey just goes to Arataki and just goes into the pot along with everything else. So it's like, how can we divert that honey into something else and something different? Spring Hill's got a fantastic horticulture program going there. But currently they grow fruit and vegetables, beautiful fruit and vegetables that go to the local church or Women's Refuge, etc. But what they're not allowed to do under the national contract that Corrections has with its current food supplier is that the produce that they grow is not allowed to be used in the prison meals, which I think is a crime in and of itself, to be honest. So trying to get that changed so we can, so they call it from the ground up, where these men are taught to basically, nurture these plants up. But the vital connection is like, what do you do next with that pumpkin? It's kind of missing, rather than just put it into a crate and send it off to somebody else. So, yeah, I mean, there's work being done in and around that space.
Thanks very much.
No, my pleasure.
Chris.
I'll just stay there, Marty. A few words of thanks. You can move over just a little bit. Before I ask the members to show their appreciation, I would like to present you with this gift from the Rotary Club. We specialise in giving totally inappropriate gifts to speakers, and so I'd like you to have a copy of the Rotary Cookbook. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a number of high quality speakers here every week, but I don't think we often have them that speak quite so much from the heart. So if you'd like to show your appreciation in all manner, thank you very much.